Hi, I'm Tim Constantine from the Washington Times, joined by my good friend for America. He is Dave Bozell. Hi, Dave.
Mr. Constantine, how are you?
I am doing outstanding. You know, I was thinking if I go to the airport, which I do at least twice a week, I got to have an ID with me in order to get on the plane. I can't just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm Tim, let me on." If I want to go get liquor, at this point I got a lot of gray hair, so they will allow me, but if you're of a certain age, you got to have an ID to buy a bottle of beer. So I'm wondering, why is it so controversial that you should have an ID in order to pick up your ballot and
Right.
vote? One of the most important civic duties you can possibly have.
Right. Well, it's not controversial. It's an 83% issue. The only ones making it controversial, well, Schumer and Jeffries and these guys, because there's they have political motivations. But it's not controversial at all to the American people. I don't know why, for the life of me, Tim. Don't know. I can't. I'm starting to think that there must be something that Republican senators who aren't pushing hard for this, that there's something nefarious going on.
When I look at this, like you mentioned Chuck Schumer, you
Yeah.
can actually pull footage of Joe Biden from years ago saying you should have an ID. You can pull footage of Chuck Schumer from years ago where he says you should have an ID.
Yeah, he should.
Now he says, oh, it's Jim Crow 2.0. Jim Crow, of course, is when there were racial issues, they would have a poll tax. They would force people who'd never been educated, say you must be able to read to a certain level. They would find ways of excluding. This is none of that. They made the same claim, if you remember, when Georgia implemented a statewide ID. They said, oh, it's Jim Crow 2.0. That next election, Georgia had more voters than ever before and had literally zero incidents of people complaining they were turned away. So there is no 2.0 here.
Well, Chuck Schumer's on the wrong side of his own party. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, this is how when you're at an 83% issue, right, across the board, you're going to have Democrat support. And in fact, CNN broke it down. 85% or 95%, I think, of Republicans are supporting of voter ID, and 71% of Democrats. 71% of Democrats are supportive of voter ID. But for the life of me, Tim, I just cannot understand why the Republican Party has spent tens of millions of dollars raising untold billions of dollars to get elected on the premise of voter integrity, election integrity, and voter ID. And then when they have control of both chambers, as they do now, and John Thune and his cohorts in the Senate, all they have to do is make the Democrats stand up and sweat until they stop talking, and then pass this thing and secure American elections for the future of democracy, etc. I just cannot understand how either it's just unbelievably sheer laziness on their part, or there's something nefarious going on.
I don't know if you remember this, but a little more than 10 years ago, there was a guy named Barack Obama who was president of the United States. He had an attorney general by the name of Eric Holder.
Yeah.
And there was a podcaster who went to, and Eric Holder was an older, middle-aged black man. There was a podcaster who was a young man in his 20s, white guy, went to Eric Holder's district, requested his ballot because there was no ID required there, and they gave it to him. And this is the Attorney General of the United States, and they turned his ballot. Now, the kid did not fill it out because that's when you cross the line and break federal law. But standing there and accepting the ballot and then taking a picture, perfectly legal, but made the point that, my goodness, if this young guy can go and take the ballot of the Attorney General of the United States, imagine the fraud that could happen nationwide if you have no ID required whatsoever.
Yeah, and for the strict constitutionalists out there who just want want the states to be in charge of federal elections and have that authority. Look, I don't think the founders intended or envisioned so many states essentially committing fraud with their voter rolls and their voter election systems. And so this is why I think voter ID is a necessity. It's something that the president has campaigned on twice. It is something the Republican Party has spent untold billions of dollars to get themselves elected. And if they do not come through with this, with being the party in charge, they won't just lose the midterms; they'll get crushed.
I know when we hear different names, if you live outside of Washington, D.C., if this is not the center of the universe to you, but taking your child to Little League or ballet is more important to you, when you hear something like the SAVE Act, it may not mean anything to you. This one, it really should. It simply means people ought to show their ID when they get their ballot. Make sure the right person is actually voting with their ballot. Really simple. Really simple.
Simple stuff, Tim. And again, something that the Republican Party. I mean, gosh, you mean how many parties, how many dinner, cold chicken dinners are in town, raising tens of millions of dollars so that they could do this, and it's right there for the taking for them. And now we're talking about John Thune's out there talking about, well, we might have to have floor time for a highway bill. I mean, I don't know what's more important: the future of federal elections and the integrity of federal elections, or some highways. I'm going with the former, and not only that, it's in their platform. I mean, I don't know. I mean, apparently John Thune thinks they don't have time to execute the Republican Party platform.
Yeah, the frustration is the party has said they want to do it on every level, political, right there in the Senate, right there in the House. So if you want to, please go ahead and take the action. If for some reason the Republicans don't think you should have an ID to vote, they ought to speak up and say that. Otherwise, go ahead and take the action. Absolutely. He is for America. He's Dave Bozell. I'm Tim Constantine. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.